sent out. That's the lesson that's runs through all of these lessons for the week, is the principle of unity. I want to start off by saying that unity exists. It just is. It always is. So now I could just say, well, the principle of unity exists and the principle always exists, but what I mean to say is that unity itself, that which the principle describes, exists. Always. So all the time, every day, every moment, every hour, we are unified. We are actually existing in this basic state of unity. You can call it the unity of all life. You could just say it's harmony. It is oneness. It is that which the atonement establishes in the world. Now, that being said, it doesn't seem so. Most of the time, we are seeing other things that say we're not, that we are not in unity, that we are not unified. And a lot of time, we notice that other people actually seem to be disunifying. That other people are not acting in a way that would promote harmony. They're doing things. And then in rarer times, we will notice that we seem to be disunifying. But it is a principle and it is a state that exists and cannot actually be disrupted except in our own minds. Because that's where the problems lie. That's where unity can only be disrupted in our own thinking. And so what I'm saying is the whole thing, when we think we're not in unity, when we think it's not harmony, that's because we are seeing something that's actually not there. Now this is really important. I don't mean that we should, and I know I say this every week. It's not about saying, well, that's not real, so I'm just going to ignore it. That's just denial that doesn't work. The fact of the matter is, when we believe that we're not in harmony, when we feel like unity is not present, that's our experience. That's the experience we're in. That's what we're seeing right now. And so the path out of it is to recognize that that's what we're seeing. Just admit to it, right? It's an error. It's an error, but not an error we should feel guilty about. It's just our experience of the moment is in error. So we admit, okay, this is where I'm at right now. Right now, I'm seeing all these things that say there's really not any unity. And then don't do anything for a second. Right? This is the key to this whole forgiveness idea, is that what I'm going to do is I'm observing the fact that this is my present experience. I'm going to keep myself from reacting. I'm going to just, even if I have to hold on with both hands at first, I'm just not going to jump into the fray. I'm just not going to react. And then I'm going to present this thing that I'm observing as disunity, as inharmony, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to present that to this inner guide. Now, I said inner guide because I know that there's a couple people here who are going to be uncomfortable if I said I'm going to present that to Jesus. I'm going to give it to Jesus right now. I'm going to give it to the Holy Spirit. I'm going to give it to God. Whatever feels most calming to you, that's the principle to use. What I'm saying is those are all terms for the same thing. There's this divinity within us. And we could just think about it as, if we really want to think about it in psychological terms, we could just think about it as the observer. That the real part of us is the observer. And so what I want to do is present this view that I have in my ego mind to this impartial, that's the thing about the observer. The observer is not involved emotionally at all. The observer is just observing. And I'm going to present that and say, show me what's really here. so that my vision can be healed. But I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not going to push it down. I'm not going to shove it away. I'm not going to project that problem onto somebody else. I'm going to admit to it, and then I'm going to ask for help with it. So, and for our practice, what we're talking about here is it's very important to understand that I'm not asking for help from something outside of myself. I'm actually asking for help from the greater self, of which we are all a part. But it's in me. It's in all of us. So it's not like I'm begging some outside entity to help me with this, which is what most people see when you say, I'm going to give it to Jesus, right? So, but it's all going on the inside. So unity, it's like the first principle. It's the first principle of relationships. You could say it's actually the first principle that I talk about in the marriage ceremony. But it's the first principle of relationship. Is this idea that I am going to keep the common welfare in my mind. And the reason I'm going to keep the common welfare in my mind is because the happiness of the one, of me, depends upon the harmony of the two. And we know this is absolutely true. Sometimes we think we're going to take some kind of weird happiness in finding fault with somebody else, getting into opposition with them, because obviously they deserve it. So just, got to slap them around a little bit. And even if it's just like in my mind. But the fact of the matter is we are not happy in that exchange. We are not happy when we, and it comes from this, the ego has this basic thing going on all the time. Its number one activity seems to be being treated unfairly. Being treated unfairly. I'm being treated unfairly after everything that I do, after how I am a law-abiding citizen. I mean, I am a loving family member. I am generous. I am giving. I am doing all this, and then look how these people treat me. And you can just fill in the blank. These people could be anybody. These people can be the people I'm sitting at the breakfast table with. They could be the people I'm sitting at the business meeting with. They could be the people on the road around me. But it's always about, the ego is looking for that comparison. The ego is saying, and it can be just small little things or even big, gigantic things, but it's always about saying this, making this comparison. Even the people we love the most, we get into this mindset where they'll do some little thing and we figure out why we start talking about, why are they treating me like this? Why won't they go along with the program? So, this is what the ego wants to do all the time. It wants to find this, and that is the activity of unhappiness. That is the recipe for unhappiness. And then the solution that the ego has is, I'll go get this other thing. What I'm going to do is, if I'm feeling like I am being treated unfairly, for a moment, you're going to be my confidant. And I'm going to relate to you how I'm being treated unfairly by this other person. And I'm going to present it in such a way that you're absolutely going to be sympathetic to me. Unless you're really paying attention, right? You're going to be sympathetic to me and you're going to get right with me on this thing. The problem is, later on, I'm going to be getting next to somebody else. And I'm going to be presenting the same thing. And it could be I even present some stuff about you. A minute ago, you were my confidant and my trusted person. And we were but then I'll find... And see, the thing is, we don't notice a lot of times because it's not some big glaring thing. We're not character assassinating somebody. We're not being mean. We're just making a comment. It could be a comment about, I wish she could just get this thing together. Just anything like that. It's always, though, about they're a little bit less than in that moment. So this principle of unity, and it's actually a sanctuary for us to go into, is that we're all together. We're all in this together. We are unified. And that actually all life is in harmony. And it's only my thinking that messes with that harmony. Now, even in the material world where it looks as if we're causing all sorts of havoc, the way that it works is actually a harmonious way. We again, in ego and being separate, we're fighting against the harmony that even exists in the material world. And we're fighting against it, and so that becomes our experience. But the material world, if we turn our attention to the fact that we are already unified, it will start looking more and more to us like it's unified, like it's in harmony, because it's what's happening in our mind that's going to really tell the tale. So unity does not mean sacrifice. That's really important. This is not talking about, this is the general view of unity is one of the main reasons why entities have gone to war, have been able to go to war and justify it, is because they will say, is for the common welfare of our little group that we go against this other group who has a different common welfare. The principle of unity, though, says we all only have one common welfare, that we all share the same common welfare, all of us together. But so then I will say, well, now here's the thing. But we've got these interests, and this is, you've heard it said so many times concerning our country. We will say, and not just our country, all countries do this. They say it is not in the best interest of the United States. Well, the best interest, when we say it like that, whatever it is, we say it's not in the best interest of France. It doesn't matter which country. Being in the best interest means how we get over. It's not in the best interest of the United States. I mean, it's not in the best interest of us getting over on somebody else. And historically, it's always meant that whole idea of colonization and imperialism and all of that is to say, we're going to get into these less developed countries and get everything we can from them. I mean, that's really what it's meant, right? For our economic good. Well, I mean, in the short term, all that stuff actually works. In the long term, it doesn't. I mean, chickens come home to roost, which we see. So, okay, but it's always a justification. So now, then even within our little group, let's say we got a little group and we're working on the common welfare in that little group, and what we do is some situation will come up and we'll say, well, you know what? Even in our group here, we might need to sacrifice a few of us for the good of the group. Yes, we're going to sacrifice, yes. And then when those who sacrifice for the good of the group, they're the martyrs. The ones that sacrifice for the good of the group, those are the ones that they may very likely be dead. And we are saying, look at what they did. They have sacrificed for us. And in unity, there's no reason to sacrifice anybody. But we justify all of this stuff. And I've used this example before, but if you watch the movie Independence Day, you will see that aliens come to Earth. Yes. Some people say they're already here. But aliens come to Earth and they just start like taking over everything, right? They're like, we can't stop them. And so what ends up happening in the end of the movie, of course, is the one pilot sacrifices himself by doing this suicide mission right up the middle of the master alien ship, right? And everybody thinks this is fantastic. Everybody is really excited. The guy killed himself, but he brought down the ship. Now, whatever you think about that, you can think, well, okay, he made a decision. He sacrificed himself for the good, and then that was his decision, and it turned out to be a good outcome for those that are left behind. What's the difference between that and somebody carrying a bomb into some place where they think they're going to affect some kind of change like that? This is why years ago the definition came out that terrorism is the last refuge of the weak. This kind of sacrifice, and look at the philosophy. What the philosophy is doing is the same thing that all these philosophies of ego have done in the past. You need to sacrifice yourself for our good. But then we're going to make you a martyr. I mean, you're going to be a hero. You'll be dead, but no, your body will be dead. And this is the other thing that goes along with it. They start saying, well, you're going to get other rewards in heaven as a result of this. What I'm saying is if we get our minds into this state of harmony, this state of unity, we will never ask anyone to sacrifice themselves at all. The fact is, there's an abundance of all things that are needed. There's an abundance of everything. And I'm not calling for some redistribution of wealth. All I'm saying is, let's stop stealing from other people. Not just us, let's stop thinking of that idea that it's okay to take advantage of someone, to get over on, because it throws our mindset totally out of whack. And it puts us in a place where we have to defend that which we've stolen. We have to defend that, not just physically defend it, but we're continually defending it in our mind. So it's just another whole series of things to be guilty about. I don't know, but wait, I'm not really guilty about it because they're not like us. That's why I can't understand them. This is a part of this whole strategy in any organization. When they start talking bad about another organization, no matter big or small, the whole strategy is to get your members to think these other people are different. There's something wrong with these other people. And the mind's doing that all the time, so we buy right into it. The ego mind is doing it all the time. It's telling us people are different from us all the time. It's telling us that we're under threat. So what I'm saying is the good will, God's will, is good for the best, for good for all, right? And you know what? You would not get an argument about that, no matter where you go. If you just said that statement, for those who could get behind the idea of God's will at all, right? Nobody would say, well, God's will is not for the good for everyone. But once examined and started to look at closely, we would say, well, God's will really is more for the believers. God's will is really more for not just the believers, the true believers. And not just the true believers, but God's will is really for those who really stick to the letter. There's always some reason to separate ourselves. And so it seems to disrupt unity. But unity exists. Unity is just there. If we look at societies where this common welfare idea is more propagated than in others, there's always a price to pay. And Japan just went through it. The idea of sacrificing the individual for the good of the collective, it just doesn't work over a long period of time. So they end up with a whole generation of people who've totally rebelled against the system. But here's the idea, that what's good for the whole is really what's best for me. Because I'm part of the whole. But if someone's manipulating in there, if someone else is manipulating in there, it's really easy to see, well, really when we say what's good for the whole, it's better for certain people at certain strata and all this kind of stuff. But that's just all illusion and all trapping. That's just all the arguments that the ego mind wants to make about this. I want to return to the principle of unity, that it just is. Unity is. So, we are in reality when we can observe the unity of all life. This is when we move out of fear. When we get quiet and just observe the fact. And even as I said, even on the material level, on the apparent level, if we look closely enough, we can see that the web of life is all connected. The unity of all life. I want to be able to observe it. We are real in the light of good. I want to release the illusion that the apparent behavior of others determines our well-being. Again, we're having experiences in the world. So sometimes people do stuff. And in the material world, it actually, in that experience, it does seem to impact our well-being. But it cannot impact our true being. It just impacts this experience of the moment. If we want to get past that, if we want to go through that, we have to see that really, in spirit, we can't be harmed. So we can let go of the hate that we harbor. We can examine the reality. And first of all, just talk about from a psychological point of view, there's absolutely no reason to expect that anyone will act the way we think we need them to act. There's no logical reason for us to think that, except that we have a sense of entitlement. The ego has a sense of entitlement. People need to act right. We have no control over how other people act. We do have control about what we do with how other people act. So when we do this, what happens is when we put them, it relegates these people into a role. See, the only time I'm going to get along with you is when you're acting the way I want you to act. And then that's your role then. You have a role to play in my life. This happens. I was watching Better Call Saul. You watch Better Call Saul? It's beautiful. His brother, look, the guy's brother, Jimmy's brother, loves him, right? But he's got him in a role. He has relegated him to a role. And when Jimmy steps outside that role, I don't know if you didn't see it, watch it. But Jimmy steps out the role, and his brother can't deal with it. He says, "You're not a real lawyer." He says, you've gone outside the role that I had for you. So this is what we're doing all the time. All of a sudden, somebody comes and surprises us with some new kind of behavior. Oh my goodness, we would rather have them act bad than come to us with some crazy new thing that we're not prepared for. So we want to stop relegating people to a role. The second part of this is it ties our happiness to the way that they act. Let me read this to you. The lesson for today is, lesson for yesterday actually was God's will for me is perfect happiness. And the lesson for today is I share God's will for happiness for me. Seems simple enough. If God's will for me is happiness, I want to share the will for happiness. I want that to be my will. There's There was let me see if I can find this. Happiness is just the state that we were actually created in. It is the state. God's will for us is perfect happiness. There is no sin.